welcome back. Appreciate you guys joining us again for our weekly series of webinars. We've got a great one for you this morning. For those of you new to us, I'm John Miller with Rock Solid Law, a firm I founded 30 years ago. Hard to believe, but we are really enjoying the things we do in the community. I'd like to start this morning by congratulating my friend, Dr. Bridget, and I can't say it correctly, even though I have Celtic blood. Sláinte, I believe, is how we say that word. That means cheers and good health. In Celtic's not correct. Is it Gaelic? And she is the brand new overall Jack's Chamber Small Business Leader of the Year. It took 5 years after I was fortunate enough to fill that position for someone from the beach to win it. I could not be happier for a wonderful member of our business community at the beaches to be so honored. I think it's going to be an amazing year for her. If you don't know her, check her out, get to know her. I don't usually do networking on these calls. That's not the purpose, but I am just so happy and proud for her. So this morning, we have a great program for you. I'm really, really excited not to be the only lawyer on the call today. First, of course, we practice in real estate, and we also practice in small business representation, but a significant portion of our practice, I believe currently about 40%, is in the estate planning area. And some really important things go on for our families, and we're all about preserving the American family. I'd like to ask you guys, if you would please, everybody that's online, to go to your chat bar. Some of you have already been there. For those of you that don't, on my screen, it's about where Zach's collar is next to his tie. It's very close to the middle. If you move your cursor, you'll find it. And any of you who have been involved in a trust, any kind of trust, a revocable living trust, an irrevocable trust, any sort of trust out there, either as grantor, beneficiary, perhaps as trustee, will you please type into the chat something like yes or I have? Going to give you just a second to do that for me. All right, so you're probably following it as well. We only have a couple of people that are on the call that have worked in that capacity, so that's great. I think this presentation is going to be good for either side, but we wanted to know who had done that sort of thing before. So guys, the trustee, right? Very important position in estate planning. And in many of our trusts, we have a dear friend, a brother, a sister, often parents, sometimes an adult child appointing as the trustee for people's estate planning, which in some families, in some estates, is a perfectly excellent and legitimate choice. Other families may need another alternative. And so the thing to think about there is most of us are chosen as trustee, have little understanding of what the role of a trustee is, and certainly have no training in that regard. So I am fortunate to have with us today from BBVA, Zach Kleiman, who is new to our Northeast Florida area and has recently transitioned from a full-time law practice to bring his family, including a new puppy, right, Zach?
Pretty much, 8-month-old puppy, yep.
Wow, yes, to Northeast Florida. I had the great fortune to be introduced to him shortly after he got here. And I asked Zach to join us today and just give us the lowdown on what a corporate trustee is, does, and how it works with regard to trust. Zach, want to take it away?
Thanks, John. Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on this very cold Jacksonville morning. As somebody born and raised in South Florida, 40 degrees is very cold for me. And puppy walks at 6 a.m. don't really work the same as they normally do. So trying to stay warm. As John mentioned, this presentation and this conversation is not going to be for everybody. Your family may be in a situation where Your spouse can be a trustee, your brother, your children, they can all be trustees. But things tend to get complicated, and all families are unique, all beneficiaries are unique. And as a corporate trustee, we're here to jump in and kind of provide a coverall service to any single individual who may need somebody to take an objective view of a trust and make sure a trust is done the way that you intended. If you're acting as grantor, I know we had a couple people in the chat say that they were involved in a trust in one way or the other. If you're a grantor, which means you're setting up a trust for the benefit of somebody else, you're spending time and money to set up a trust in a very specific way. If it's a revocable trust, you may have made several changes to it. You've paid a lawyer. You've probably sunk a few $1,000s and a good amount of hours into making sure it's done correctly. What you don't want to happen is at the time of your passing, when your successor trustee steps in, is they get pressured by siblings or family members or a spouse, somebody along the way, to skew outside the lines of the distribution pattern of that trust. Why would you take all this time and money and energy to set up a trust just for a successor trustee to change it? You wouldn't. And that's not something that you can control. Obviously, you're not here anymore. Well, if you feel that you know your children well enough, or your siblings, or your spouse well enough, where they are succumb to peer pressure sometimes, guilt trips are very common, and you want to take that responsibility off their shoulders, you don't want to have them go through that. There's a role as a corporate trustee where you can appoint a bank or a trust company to step in and act as trustee. Now, what does that really mean? And what do we really do?
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
I love storytelling. And when you were practicing down in Vero Beach, did you ever have the opportunity, now we'll keep the names changed, but to live through a family scenario where maybe you saw some pressure exerted on a successor trustee? Can you give us a little sketch of what that looks like?
Absolutely. So in a situation where a spouse has deceased, so we have a widow who usually appoints, and John, you've tended to see this, where the oldest child tends to take the trustee role for whatever reason. I'm a middle child, so if you see a little bias my way, understand it. The oldest child tends to be the most responsible, and as long as my older sister's not on this call, we're good to go. Siblings tend to know the pressure points of other siblings. We had a situation where a widow set up their oldest child as trustee. She passed, oldest sibling took over. The distribution pattern for this trust was very specific. Every child was supposed to get 1/3 of their share of the trust at age 45, another share at 50, and then 55. Well, as tends to happen, the youngest child had 2 kids. One of them was about to turn 16. She wanted to get this child a car. So why save up money when you know you have a trust around? Called oldest sibling. Youngest sibling was about 5 to 10 years from really getting that big share of the trust, exerted a ton of pressure and pressure points and saying, well, you don't care for your niece. I want to, you want to supply your niece a car for her 16th birthday. We had a couple phone calls with this client and she had to say no. And what happens is you get a little bit of a sticking point with your sibling, and sibling fights can last a little while depending on your family. And what happened was it took about 1 or 2 years to completely mend that relationship. So when you're appointing somebody as trustee, it's not only putting full faith and trust that they're going to take your wishes and make sure it's done correctly, but you're also putting them in a situation where they're going to have to say no to people that they love. And that's a really difficult and strong responsibility for a lot of people.
Sure. So, I often say that the probate system is where families go to fight. And yep. Sadly, we see, especially siblings, but other family members often fall apart in a time that burns down the family tree and will never be reestablished. But there's a point also in a trust, which we try to avoid in our planning, those family fights, where we can set it up so that there is a fight. I happen to be the eldest and an attorney, so you know who got it in my family, and I'm asking for family meetings in advance while my mother's still alive and healthy, so that my sibs understand
Yep.
what it is we're doing. I don't think any of them are on the line this morning either.
Just got to
That,
double check on that.
exact. I think putting a little flesh on the bones and telling some real stories so people understand what can go wrong, what the problems that can be created are, is a great way of making people understand what your role is.
Absolutely. And I think when you're thinking about successor trustees, and John, you can probably back me up on this. When you have somebody come into your office and want to set up a trust, the main focus tends to be how to prepare and how to provide for my children and my grandchildren. Let's talk about distribution patterns. Let's talk about how long we can hold this in trust. What's not always discussed as in depth as I think it really should be is who is going to take over this trust when I'm gone. If you're married, the very common answer is let's just put my spouse in charge. You know, they know the children, they know my grandchildren as well as anybody. That's fine. I had a situation where husband worked, provided all the income, but the wife paid all the bills. So what happens when the wife passed and the husband's in charge of everything? He had no idea how to pay the bills. And it's a little traditional, but it's pretty common to see spouses separate relationships so that one person handles all the bills, all the budgetary reasons, and the other person handles something else. So when you're looking at who you should appoint as a successor trustee on a revocable trust or a trustee on an irrevocable trust, you want to make sure that they understand all the responsibilities that they take over and also the burden that you're putting on them. Now, I say that generously because some families are easier than others, but when grief and money coincide, it's not always pretty. And that's really unfortunate. And as practitioners, we look to avoid that as much as possible, but it's not always something that any family can control. I know that when I had clients come through my office, usually married, it was spouse as successor trustee, and then we didn't get far enough to talk about who was going to take over after that. Here's the downside of that is if you're married and you're talking about appointing your spouse as your personal representative under your will or as your trustee, how often are the two of you in a car together? What happens if both of you pass? Now you don't have anybody named. And whether it's a fallback option or whether it's just, you know what, I don't want my spouse dealing with all of the burdens and getting guilt tripped for my kids and my grandkids and dealing with filing tax returns, managing assets, asset allocation, investment strategies. All of these are things that trustees are supposed to be able to manage. It's not really that easy. So banks and trust companies step in and help manage all of those assets. And we at BBVA, as a corporate trustee, carry under all that under one roof. So if you're working as a corporate trustee, you're talking about investment strategy, asset allocation, collection of income, managing and administering your trust according to the distribution schedule, anything that the trustee could potentially view as an obstacle or something that they have to take care of, even simple things like bill pay, like I mentioned. There's a lot that goes into being a trustee, and it's not easy. A lot of people feel that they can carry that burden, and then they get appointed into that role and they take over that role, and they realize it's almost a full-time job depending on the size of the trust. John, I'm pretty sure you and I have talked about this, but if you have a $20 million trust and it's got rental properties inside of it, you're looking at basically running a medium-sized business. And if you're somebody who works already, and now you're dealing with a medium-sized business that also has beneficiaries on it, are you sure you want to appoint your brother who hasn't owned property before to that role?
Right.
It's careful consideration as to everything that goes into what you need to manage on a day-to-day basis. And from the corporate trustee side, we have years of experience in this role. We have understanding of every wealth strategy and estate planning technique that could possibly help your family in terms of generational wealth transfers, making sure your estate is tax efficient, making sure tax returns are filed. all of this is a role that corporate trustees take on a day-to-day basis. And you're dealing with individuals like me and my boss and his boss and people who have been in this industry for a long time. And it not only gives you objectivity in terms of dealing with your beneficiaries, but ideally we're giving you peace of mind that all the hours that you spent pouring into your trust, trying to understand what your attorney drafted, because John, you and I know very well that we've had some concerns sometimes about, are you sure that you've read this document, because you're asking me questions like, you probably should know this.
Or just didn't understand it, because
correct.
Even intelligent people aren't necessarily trained to read the legalese. As plain spoken as I try to be at Rock Solid, when we write the documents, they still have to be language that will be properly construed if they're ever challenged. So It's not like we can just write, Dick and Sally, or Sally, Dick and Jane, or whatever that book was we learned to read on. I know that's really old school. I understand that, people, and my kids don't even know who those people are. But the words are convoluted, and the layperson, even a very intelligent layperson, may not understand them. So I think it's a great thing to have a trustee who's educated in that. I mean, Zach got his, undergrad law and master's at University of Florida.
Just the master's in the law degree.
Okay.
I'm a knight. I'm a UCF knight for undergrad. So.
Okay. All right. Sorry to UCF for leaving them out of that conversation. So obviously he's had a lot of training that. Hey, I forgot to mention at the top, Zach, and excuse me for interrupting, but if there are questions, just like every week, guys, we want you to ask them. This is meant to be interactive. So if you'll put them in the chat bar, I've got that open. I will see it if it comes up in Q&A, but go ahead and use the chat bar since we've already started talking on that, and I know you guys know where that is. So any questions are wide open. We all agree every week that no question is a bad question except for the unasked question. So hit us up. We've got probably another 10 minutes or so with Zach. You've got a great deal of expertise at your fingertips. Carry on, sir.
No, absolutely. And John, I can probably feel safe to assume that in your drafting technology, your software, the trustee powers that are in irrevocable trust are probably 20 paragraphs long, maybe about 5 to 6 pages.
Sure.
There's a lot in there. And when you're appointing somebody to that role, you're giving them all of that power. I'm about to borrow Spider-Man references, which I did not expect, but with all that power comes great responsibility. And it's true, because you have a lot to take care of, not only in terms of the day-to-day, but if your spouse appointed you a successor trustee, more than likely they want this trust to last for their children's lifetime and to benefit their grandchildren. So now we're talking, how do I manage a trust for the next 40 to 50 years? And more than likely, you're probably not going to last for the next 40 to 50 years. So when you're the grantor and you're appointing your spouse or your brother, who happens to be 5 years older than you, is that going to be the best decision for the long-term health of the trust? And I think that's another area where corporate trustees provide peace of mind, in that we're going to be objective. We're going to make sure everything is taken care of the way it is. And we're also going to be permanent. We're going to be here for as long as you want us to be there for. You don't have to worry about your children 20 years down the road appointing a new trustee, trying to find somebody who's willing to take on that role. And that is something that goes unnoticed and not as often talked about, is how do we plan for 30 years down the road for trustees? And when it comes to that strategy, the easiest way is probably a corporate trustee for you. If you feel confident that your spouse is going to live for the next 20 years or your kids are going to live for the next 40 years, that's great. Maybe a corporate trustee, you don't want to get involved, that's totally understandable. But if you have some concerns, or if you just want to have some peace of mind that you know somebody's going to be there for your kids and your grandkids, a corporate trustee is something that you should take a look at. I see a question from Heather in the chat.
Let me jump in while you read it, Zach.
Yeah.
So Heather, you've anticipated me. Obviously, that is exactly a subject that we will be addressing in a future webinar. And Heather is asking us about changing strategies with a new administration, which happens every 4 to 8 years. It actually happens every 2 years when we figure out who's going to be in control of the House of Representatives, right? So it's ever changing. And I would like to address that in a future webinar, but we have Zach online now. So maybe you've got some comments on that. From my perspective, quickly, Heather, we're waiting with regard to specific strategies to see how things settle in, right? We're still in a fairly transitional phase, a very transitional phase now. So I don't think we know everything we're going to know, say in 3 or 4 months. I will say that I continue to advocate having an analysis done of qualified plan funds, specifically with respect to a Roth conversion, because I believe most people anticipate taxes on high end going up. And the sooner a Roth conversion occurs, I don't think there's any harm in doing it. And I think some people could benefit greatly. You want to take that one? And they're starting to roll in, Zach. So after that one, we've got another great question.
Yeah, I can touch on that. Obviously, we've still seen some proposals from the Biden administration as to what they were discussing, what they were looking at. I think, and this is a good plug area for me, is we've had, and by we, I mean myself as the trust specialist for the entire Florida footprint for BBVA, as along with our financial consultants and our private bankers, have had conversations with our clients about, hey, now might be a good time. If you didn't do it at the end of last year, now might be a good time to meet with your estate planning attorney. Let's talk about some strategies. Are you looking at a taxable estate? Are you looking at a larger than expected estate tax bill? And as a BBVA team, you've gotten years of experience in dealing with estate tax, making sure your assets are lined up correctly, where you're getting private banking, financial consultants, financial advisors, and myself all talking about different strategies to outline and give to you to best reduce your estate tax liability, or give you options and plans to meet with your attorney about discussions on how to best address potential changes. So I think there's a variety of ways that corporate trustees can help, even if you're just a client of BBVA. If you have questions, it's a good time to at least revisit it and definitely discuss with John or your attorney about potential changes and how you can address that.
And we want to bring in your financial advisor on that as well.
Yep.
Heather, I think reading between the lines on what Zach just addressed, we're all looking at what a taxable estate will be on the federal level in the future. Of course, right now it's at its historic highest level ever. And we expect there to be some change. We just don't know what it's going to be and which estates will be taxable. So Zach, just so you know, Dan Miller is a business owner, a small business leader of the year for the chamber himself. And he's got a couple of really good questions for anybody that's not on the chat bar. His first one is, how is the corporate trustee compensated? And then the next one is, does the corporate trustee act like a chair of a board with spouse, children, et cetera, as part of a group to oversee the trust? I think those are two great questions, Zach, and I'll just take a step back and let you answer them.
Yeah, Dan, those are great questions and really important questions as well. I will speak to BBVA, and I don't want to speak for every other corporate trust company, but we are based on a percentage of the trust assets. So we are paid, we have a fee schedule that if you are really interested, we can have a separate conversation about that, but we're based on a fee schedule in terms of what the total trust assets are that are under our management. And that is fairly common across the board. Depending on what the fees are, those can vary among trust companies. But with the payment of trustee fees for the corporate trustee, you're getting the entirety of investment management advice, you're getting record keeping, tax filings, you're getting everything that a trustee is supposed to be doing. So when you think about the overall scale, if you're an individual trustee and you're taking on this role, how many times are you going to need to speak to an attorney, an accountant, an investment manager? All those are going to rack up your fees. So I know when I was in private practice, a lot of our clients would shy away from corporate trustees because they thought the fees were going to be too high. But when you're having a conversation with them, you realize that the fees start to rack up in terms of making sure everything is taken care of on the trust. So having it all under one roof, when we talk to clients and now from this side, it's really convenient and a lot easier to deal with. And as to your second question, it really depends on what you want in your trust and what you want to happen. I know that BBVA, we can act as co-trustee. And in that situation, we would be serving alongside a spouse, a child, a sibling, whatever it is. So if that's what you prefer, then by all means, some corporate trustees may not want that role, may not want that responsibility to be working alongside somebody. It really depends on the trust document and what the trust says. But if you would prefer that your children take an active part in trustee administration and management, that's a conversation you can have and figure out if that's the best strategy moving forward for you. So absolutely, they can act as that, kind of like a chairman, or they can just act as trustee and make sure all the distributions are taken care of, where they are overseeing every aspect of administration and management of the trust.
Yeah, great answer. I hope that was good for you, Dan. I want to interject here. We got a few more minutes to talk with Zach. If there are more questions, send them in. But Zach is with BBVA, and I think pretty much everybody on the line knows how to get in touch with me. I'd be glad to connect you, any of you there. He is the senior specialist for asset management and trust, and as he mentioned already, for the entire Florida footprint, right? He's responsible for management and administration of fiduciary and trust activity. As I mentioned before, he's been an estate planning lawyer, so he understands the seat I sit in, which makes it really easy for me to work with him as well. So I don't see another question right now. Zach, what other important comments would you like to make this morning? We usually wrap up in about 5 or 7 minutes.
I would just like to say that corporate trustees, there's kind of and John, you and I have had this conversation. I think that's what the impetus of this webinar was, has this strange veil of secrecy as to what it really is. I know in private practice in Vero Beach, we had a couple corporate trustees in the area, and individuals, and even myself, weren't really sure what a corporate trustee did, what it looked like on the back end. So it has this kind of dark, secretive, bank-like corporate structure, which I completely understand from that side of things. As I got to know more trust officers in Vero Beach and in this role, it's really the complete opposite. We're here to serve our clients in any role that we can. Whether we're acting as trustee, whether we're acting as agent for you in a revocable trust situation where we're basically just investing your assets. If you have bills to pay, just let us know and give us the bill and we'll make sure it's paid for you. It's really a one-to-one relationship in many senses where you're not dealing with this huge corporate structure. At BBVA, where we like to call ourselves a lean, mean trust company, because I'm responsible for the entire Florida footprint. So you're dealing with me, you're dealing with my trust assistant. And that's really all that we have, which is great because I get to know everybody on a very personal basis. You're dealing with somebody who you can get in contact with through a phone call. You're not jumping through hoops. You're not jumping through call centers. You're dealing with me, which is good and bad. Sorry, whether you like me or not.
I think it's good.
Okay, great. And when you are designing your estate plan, you have a lot of things that you have on your mind. You have distribution patterns. Do you have a child who's a little tougher? Do you have an angel child who can handle their own trust? Do you think a corporate trustee, even appointing them or us as successor to the successor, just to have a safe fallback, is that your best option? And I think the really interesting part of joining BBVA in this role is my job is to solidify relationships and provide support for our wealth team here in Jacksonville and throughout the state. What that means is a lot of times we're introduced to people in their 40s and 50s who are on maybe their second step of estate planning. They had a trust set up. Really, they were focused on the guardians of the children, things like that. Now they've come into a little bit of wealth. Their business has appreciated. What does that really represent? And who do you trust to take over? Well, if you're appointing BBVA as a successor, we're hoping you live for quite a while. We're hoping you live for about 40 to 50 years because we want you to be around. We want your business to appreciate. We want you to live a full, healthy life. However, we don't really see any fee revenue or any real drawback to our business until you pass away or you get sick or something like that. So really, we're just solidifying relationships and getting to know you for a long time, which is the real interesting part of a trust company. Is we don't see anything for quite a while until something happens to you, and we prefer nothing happen to you. So ideally, we just get to know you and have conversations every month, every couple of weeks, how often you need us to discuss changes in tax, changes in estate planning, which is great for me because really the best part of my day is getting to know everybody, especially coming into a new city. John, I know we've had a couple lunches and it's been great. And you really want to understand the community, understand people's families, what your background is, what your businesses were, what your passions are, and create that connection. For me, a trustee and a corporate trustee, and I apologize if nobody's a football fan on this call, but you're supposed to be like an offensive lineman where as long as you're doing your job, everybody's happy. If you're being talked about, that's not good. Mm-hmm. You should just do your job, handle distributions, handle investments, file taxes, and do what you're supposed to do so that everybody can benefit. So that's really our role as corporate trustee. We're trying to take everybody's burden off your shoulders, give you a little peace of mind that things are going to take care of the way that you wanted them to, and provide you a bunch of experience and expertise along the way. So John can get you in contact with me if you're really interested, you just want to have a conversation more in depth about what we can provide, or if you want to have a conversation about estate planning, just overall experience, please call John and he'll set you up real great. So
awesome, Zach. Thank you so much, guys. I think most of you know that I'm at 904-241-1113. You can also write us at questions@Rock Solid Law. With any questions you might have, and I will be very happy to connect you with Zach through an introductory email. Or if you want his phone number, I'll give you that as well. We are so happy to welcome you to Northeast Florida, Zach. I just know you're going to be a great asset to our community. And I feel really lucky that I met you early on in your adventure up here. And I'd like to also say that you must be an excellent dog trainer as well, because I haven't heard your puppy throughout the whole call, which is unusual in consulting with clients over Zoom these days. It's usually a child, a baby, or a puppy that is interrupting us. Everybody, we really, really appreciate you being here. This was a good one this morning. If you have ideas for future presentations, please feel free to share them. Obviously, we want to present what you want to hear. Have a fantastic day, and we'll take you out, as always, with the Commodores. Zach, thank you for being here, my friend. Talk to you soon.
All right, John. Thank you so much.